Welcome back, APES team. In this screencast, we're going to cover sections 13.3, 13.4, and 13.5. In section 13.3, we're going to talk about how we can expand surface water resources and our fresh water supply. We need to understand why we build large dams. We need to understand the benefits they provide and the problems they create. The main goal of building a dam and a reservoir behind it is to capture and store runoff. This runoff can be held back or released for different purposes. First, we can hold water back to prevent flooding downstream. Secondly, we can use the water to turn a turbine in a generator to generate electricity. This is called hydroelectric power, or simply hydropower. Third, we can use water in a reservoir to supply farms and cities with the water they need. And finally, people enjoy activities like fishing, boating, and water skiing in the man-made lakes that reservoirs create. Dams provide several advantages. First, they increase the amount of available, reliable runoff. This provides cities with a consistent, stable, and dependable source of fresh water. Secondly, they reduce flooding downstream and allow those areas to be farmed or developed. And finally, farmers can grow crops in arid regions or other areas where water supplies fluctuate or are unpredictable. Next, we need to consider the disadvantages of building large dams. Dams and the reservoirs behind them will flood upstream regions. This has the potential of displacing any people that might live there. The photo below shows a group of indigenous Malaysian people who protested and successfully blocked the building of a dam on their native lands. Dams and reservoirs will also destroy habitat and disrupt ecosystems upstream. Downstream, dams will reduce water flow, and this can cause streams and lakes to dry up. It can cause further habitat destruction, ecosystem disruption, and can cause loss of plant and animal species. These satellite images show how a dam in Cambodia flooded upstream regions and altered the landscape within 1 year of being built. Rivers do not just carry water, they also carry sediment, and dams can cause reservoirs to fill up with sediment over time. This is called dam sedimentation, and it can lower the ability of a dam and reservoir system to store water and generate electricity. It can also deprive river deltas of sediment, causing shorelines to erode and recede. This photograph shows how rivers can carry more than just water and how dams can trap trash and litter behind them. This diagram summarizes the advantages and disadvantages of building dams and reservoirs. This diagram shows how hydroelectric power is generated. Water flows through the dam, turning a turbine and generating electricity. In section 13.4, we're going to talk about water transfers and how they can expand water supplies. A water transfer is a transfer of water from one river to another. Water transfers are accomplished by building river diversions and pipelines. The purpose of a water transfer is to send water where it is most needed. An example most familiar to us is the California Aqueduct, which is 400 miles long and carries water from Northern California to Southern California. The world's largest water transfer is China's South-North Water Diversion Project and diverts 6 trillion gallons of water each year. Water transfers do have their disadvantages. First, they are inefficient because water can evaporate as they are diverted and transferred from one place to another. Secondly, They can cause ecosystem degradation when river diversions and pipelines are built. The map on the left shows the aqueducts in California and how they crisscross the state. The photograph on the right shows the California aqueduct. The negative environmental effects of water transfers can be seen in the case of the Aral Sea disaster. The Aral Sea is an inland sea that crosses the border between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Large-scale water transfers in this dry region of Central Asia have caused wetland destruction and desertification. It's also caused increased salinity in the water that's left in the sea, and it's also caused fish extinctions and declines in fishing. The photo below shows abandoned boats on the old shoreline of the sea in Uzbekistan. The shrinking of the Aral Sea has had far-reaching consequences as well. Salt has been blown. The shrinking of the Aral Sea has had far-reaching consequences as well. Wind has blown salt as far as the Himalayan mountains, where it's been deposited on glaciers, contributing to their melting. It's had effects on local weather. Summers there are now hotter and drier. Winters are colder. There have been efforts to restore the Aral Sea. Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan are now cooperating with one another. Farmers in the region are trying to irrigate their fields more efficiently. And finally, dikes have been built to try to raise the lake level and slow down evaporation. This is a map showing the location of the Aral Sea and Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan that surround it. These are satellite images of the Aral Sea in 1976 and 2012, showing the shrinking of the sea and the recession of the shoreline. In section 13.5, we're going to talk about desalination and whether or not it's a useful way of expanding freshwater supplies. Desalination is simply removing the dissolved salts from seawater, leaving behind fresh water. There are two ways in which we can do this. The first is called distillation, in which seawater is heated, allowing water to evaporate and leaving salts behind. The second technique used to desalinate saltwater is called reverse osmosis or microfiltration, in which water is pumped at high pressure through a filter, removing salts. More than 15,000 plants in 125 countries use one of these techniques to desalinate seawater. There are problems associated with desalination. The first is the high cost and high energy footprint of pumping and processing large quantities of water. Second, because seawater is an input, desalination can impede the growth of algae and kill many marine organisms. Finally, desalination produces large quantities of toxic brine waste that have to be processed or disposed of properly.